James Cartwright thought he was buying a bargain, but what he purchased was the beginning of a nightmare that would pull him into a decades-old conspiracy of silence and blood. For only $300, when the land should have cost 10 times that, he acquired an abandoned military outpost 30 miles from the nearest town. The man who sold it to him couldn't look him in the eye, his hands trembling as he muttered one warning again and again. "Just promise me you won't dig too deep." James thought the man meant the foundation, maybe unstable ground, but the truth was far more sinister. The people in town had tried to caution him in cryptic ways, muttering that some places were meant to stay empty, and some wells were better left covered. The general storekeeper whispered those words with haunted eyes before walking away, refusing to explain further. James brushed off the warnings as superstition. But on his second day, he noticed the well in the center of the outpost wasn't just covered. It was sealed shut with iron plates that looked fresh, not corroded by time. Someone had been maintaining that seal even though the place had been abandoned for over 20 years. His curiosity overwhelmed his caution, and when he pried the first plate free, the smell that rushed upward wasn't rot or decay, but something metallic and wrong, something that turned his stomach and made his skin crawl. At the bottom, something faintly glinted, and though he didn't know it yet, pulling that object from the darkness would unravel the kind of secret powerful men would kill to keep buried. James fashioned a crude rope from old leather straps and lowered himself into the well, the metallic odor thickening as each foot descended. The stone walls began smooth and precise, the work of military engineers, but soon changed to jagged rock scarred with claw-like scratches. He ran his fingers over desperate gouges made by human hands, panicked marks carved by fingernails in final moments of terror. The water at the bottom was ankle-deep and littered with objects gleaming dully in the filtered light. He bent down and retrieved a tarnished brass belt buckle, not military issue but civilian, the kind worn by shopkeepers or farmers. Then came a silver hairpin, a child's wooden horse with the initials TM carved into it, and a pocket watch engraved with "Happy Anniversary, Love Margaret." These weren't the relics of soldiers. They were the possessions of families, ordinary men, women, and children. The truth slammed into James with brutal clarity. This well was no water source, but a mass grave. The plates sealing it hadn't been meant to protect people from falling in. They were meant to keep the past locked inside. Staggering out of the well, his legs trembling, he spread the items on the ground, staring at lives erased and hidden. Each object was a testimony, a whisper from someone whose voice had been silenced decades earlier. The toy horse in particular froze him. The craftsmanship was identical to toys he'd seen in the town shops, meaning the victims weren't strangers or outsiders. They were locals, people from the very community that had watched him buy this cursed outpost, which meant someone in that quiet town knew exactly what horrors had taken place here and had chosen silence for 20 years. James carried the evidence into town, carefully wrapped to keep it safe. But instead of answers, he found fear. Conversations fell silent when he passed, and eyes followed his every move. At the general store, he laid the pocket watch on the counter before the same shopkeeper who'd once warned him away. The man's face drained of color, his hand trembling as he whispered, "Where did you find this?" James pressed him, demanding to know how long he had known. The shopkeeper only hissed that he should leave town immediately, that these were dead people, and stirring their memory would only bring him death too. Before James could reply, the store's bell chimed, and in walked Silas Abernathy, the wealthiest rancher in the region. Tall, polished, and radiating authority, Silas introduced himself and spoke with a smooth charm that rang hollow. He hinted that James should seal the well again, start fresh, and even offered to buy the property back for triple the price. But when James showed him the engraved watch, Silas's smile collapsed into a cold glare. The friendly facade vanished, and in its place stood a predator making thinly veiled threats. "Those people have been quiet for 20 years, he said flatly. "No reason they can't stay that way." James realized in that moment that Silas wasn't just another powerful landowner. He was tied directly to the crimes buried beneath his feet. When James refused to sell, the retaliation came swift and merciless. By nightfall, smoke rose over the horizon. His cabin was burning, soaked in lamp oil and set alight until nothing but collapsed timbers remained. But the fire wasn't the worst of it. Fresh hoe. Prints led from the ruins straight to the well, and when James arrived, the plates had been crudely resealed. Someone had flooded the well, diverting a stream to wash away evidence forever. The message was clear. Silas controlled the town and its silence, and anyone who threatened that silence would be crushed. Just as James prepared to leave in despair, a rancher named Caleb Hawthorne appeared, carrying a wooden box. Inside was a military button with strange markings, carried downstream by the diverted water. Caleb revealed it belonged to Silas's private militia, a so-called peacekeeping force from 20 years earlier, notorious for making families disappear. The pieces clicked into place. Silas hadn't just profited from land acquisitions. He had orchestrated killings, using his militia to erase entire families who stood in his way. Caleb warned James that Silas wasn't done. A new militia was forming, and riders were already preparing to finish what the fire had started. James knew then that he wasn't just fighting for justice anymore. He was fighting to stay alive. That night, James and Caleb took cover in the rocks near the ruins of his cabin, watching as riders with torches spread out, searching for him. 8 men, all armed, their leader barking orders to hunt James down and end the problem permanently. Caleb led James through a narrow canyon under cover of darkness, eventually reaching his ranch, only to find Silas's men already there, holding his wife and daughter hostage. The scene was suffocating. Armed guards at the doors, the family held at the kitchen table. James offered to surrender himself, but Caleb grimly shook his head, knowing Silas wouldn't leave witnesses alive. Desperate, James spotted Caleb's young daughter reaching for a kitchen drawer where a hunting knife lay hidden. In a split second, James shouted to draw the guards outside, giving the girl her chance. She struck one man in the leg while her mother grabbed his weapon, and chaos erupted. Gunfire cracked as the rest of the militia stormed back inside. In the confusion, James clutched the militia button in his pocket, realizing evidence was useless if they all died here tonight. Caleb's wife then revealed a shocking truth. Her late father, once a territorial judge, had hidden official records in the basement of the old courthouse, proof of Silas's crimes, preserved in a fireproof vault even when the building burned years earlier. It was the only hope to expose the full conspiracy. As the militia set fire to Caleb's house, the family escaped through a hidden root cellar tunnel while James slipped away into the night. His destination, the courthouse ruins. If the files were real, they could not only destroy Silas but force the authorities to act. In the ruins, James found the hidden vault using the brass key given to him by Caleb's wife. Inside, rows of preserved documents detailed abductions, land theft, and sworn witness statements pointing directly to Silas Abernathy. The most damning was a notarized testimony naming Silas as the militia leader who oversaw the disappearance of entire families. But as James gathered the files, the sound of horses closed in. Silas and his men had been waiting, and now they surrounded the courthouse. Trapped underground with one exit, James faced certain death until he discovered a hidden lever carved into the stone wall. The vault's builder had left an escape route. James slipped through the passage just as the militia stormed the chamber, emerging near the old church and riding hard toward the territorial road. Ahead, more riders appeared, but this time it wasn't militia. It was Caleb leading the territorial marshal and his cavalry, arriving faster than anyone thought possible. James handed over the documents, and in the torchlight, the marshal confirmed their authenticity. For the first time, Silas's power faltered. Cornered, Silas tried every weapon in his arsenal. First charm, then threats, then the claim that even if arrested he would walk free thanks to powerful allies. But James had saved one last piece of evidence, a sealed confession from Judge Morrison, naming every official Silas had bribed or manipulated, including the governor himself. The marshal read it aloud, grim-faced, as Silas's militia began dropping their weapons in surrender. With his influence collapsing, Silas reached for his gun, but Caleb's rifle fired first, dropping him wounded to the ground. This time there would be no escape. Bound and arrested, Silas was hauled away to stand trial. Weeks later, investigators dug up James's well, recovering the remains of 17 victims, each identified and given proper burial. Silas was convicted, hanged, and before his death revealed 3 more secret grave sites, bringing the total victims to 28. The territorial governor and several officials were also arrested, their corruption exposed at last. James used his reward money to legally purchase the land, transforming the well into a memorial garden where names were carved into stone, ensuring the families would never be forgotten again. For the first time in decades, the town began to heal. In the end, James Cartwright, a man who had only wanted a fresh start, became the voice for the forgotten. He stood by the memorial garden often, reading aloud the names etched into stone. Robert and Margaret, little Tommy Miller, Maria Santos, ordinary people whose lives had been erased, now remembered forever. What began as a cheap purchase of an abandoned outpost had unraveled into one of the darkest secrets in the frontier. But through courage, perseverance, and the refusal to stay silent, justice finally triumphed over murder and corruption. The well that once hid unspeakable horrors now reflected the open sky, a mirror of truth proving that some secrets refuse to stay buried. And if you've been captivated by this incredible true frontier story, make sure you hit that like button, subscribe to the channel, and turn on notifications so you never miss another powerful tale of justice, mystery, and survival. And if you want to support more stories like this one, consider leaving a super thanks or sharing this video with friends. Together, we keep these stories alive, giving voice to those who history tried to silence.